No one noticed the girl at first. She walked alone, always hugging the far edge of the sidewalk, her backpack twice her size, shoulders hunched like she was trying to disappear into herself. Her name was Lila, 12 years old. The kind of quiet that made teachers forget to call on her, and bullies remember she wouldn't fight back. But someone noticed. He wasn't loud. He didn't smile. He never wore a leash. He was just there. A dog. Medium-sized. Scarred. One ear torn. One eye clouded. He looked more shadow than animal. Matted fur the color of ash, paws like cracked stone, and a silent presence that made birds stop singing when he passed. The neighborhood called him a stray, a mutt, a ghost. Lila called him Shadow. She didn't know where he came from. One day, he was just sitting outside her apartment building, eyes locked on her as she stepped onto the sidewalk. She paused. He didn't move. She walked. He followed. From that day forward, he never left her side. He didn't bark. He didn't beg. He didn't wag. He simply walked next to her like a soldier returning to a post no one remembered assigning. The other kids mocked him. "What's with the zombie mutt? Careful. He might have rabies." Lila never answered. Shadow didn't either. But when a boy threw a bottle and it shattered near her feet, Shadow stepped forward, just once, and stared. The boy froze. Didn't throw again. And from then on, they kept their distance. Still, Lila didn't know who he really was. Not yet. Not until the day they followed her into the alley. Not until the moment Shadow moved like something that had once worn armor. Not until the thugs realized, far too late, that the mutt they kicked wasn't just a dog. He was trained. He was watching. And he was no longer holding back. The first time Lila touched him, she thought he would bolt. He was lying beneath the rusted fire escape, ribs showing through his fur, one paw curled under him like he was guarding it. Her backpack had torn on the way home, again, and her sketchpad had fluttered across the alley like leaves. As she scrambled to collect the pages, one landed near his front paws. She approached slowly, crouched, extended a hand, palm up. "I won't hurt you," she whispered, more to herself than to him. Shadow didn't move, didn't flinch. He just looked at her. A long, unreadable look. Then, slowly, he shifted his paw and nudged the page forward. Lila blinked. "Thank you," she said softly. It was the beginning. That night, she returned with a slice of bread and a boiled egg. He didn't touch it until she stepped away. The next day, she came with chicken from her lunch. He took it from her hand, gently. By the end of the week, he was waiting for her after school. By the end of the month, he was walking her all the way home. Not close enough to seem like a pet, just close enough to let her know she wasn't alone. Lila's apartment was on the third floor of a building that smelled like mold and something always frying. Her room had a view of a brick wall, her bed springs squeaked, and her mother worked double shifts at the diner and slept through the rest. Shadow never came inside, but he curled up just beneath her window every night. Rain or frost, sirens or silence. He was there. She started sleeping better. At school, nothing changed, at first. The bullies still cornered her at lunch, still knocked her books to the floor, still whispered insults when the teacher turned her back. But Lila changed. She started to draw more. In the margins of her notebooks, on napkins, on the inside covers of textbooks, always the same figure. A dog. Watching. Waiting. Protecting. One afternoon, a boy named Travis pulled her backpack from her shoulders and dumped it onto the steps. Before she could react, a growl echoed down the hallway. Not loud, not feral. Low. Controlled. Shadow was standing at the gate, still. Staring. Travis froze. Lila stepped forward, picked up her things, and said quietly, "You should go." He did. That evening she sat beside Shadow on the sidewalk, You're not like other dogs, she said, brushing a leaf from his back. You wait until the last second. You don't bark. You don't chase. Shadow tilted his head. I think you used to be something else, she said. Before you found me. He blinked. And in that tiny gesture, she felt something ancient staring back. Winter came early. Lila knitted him a scarf from leftover yarn. It was lumpy and uneven, but Shadow let her tie it around his neck without protest. They started taking longer walks. Past the edge of the neighborhood. Into the park. Down the river path where no one else went. Shadow always walked ahead. Then beside her. Then behind. Checking. Surveying. Like he was running a silent patrol. She tested him one day. Ducked into a hedge without warning. It took 3 seconds for him to find her. He didn't bark. Just stood at attention until she stepped out. Okay, she whispered, laughing for the first time in months. You win. The local vet noticed him. Offered to check his paw for free. Shadow refused to go inside. So the vet came out. Ran a hand gently over Shadow's spine. This one's been trained, he muttered. Not pet trained. Something higher. I'd bet my license he was K9. Lila tilted her head. What's K9? The vet looked at her. War dogs. Police dogs. Dogs trained to do things most people can't. Lila looked at Shadow. Suddenly, it all made sense. The way he moved without a sound. The way he stood guard while she ate. The way he stared at certain uniforms. And the way, when a fire truck blared down the street, he didn't panic. He lowered his head. And stood still. Like he was remembering. She asked her mom about it that night. Her mother looked surprised. Then quiet. You know, she said. Your dad once worked with a dog like that. Before he... She trailed off. He said those dogs don't forget. Even when they're lost. Even when the people are gone. Lila didn't ask more. But she held that sentence like a secret note folded in her pocket. They don't forget. Even when they're lost. The next morning, Lila packed an extra sandwich. Wrote a note on the napkin. Thank you for choosing me. Shadow ate every bite. Left the napkin untouched. It started like any other Wednesday. Gray sky, half-eaten toast. Lila pulling on a second-hand sweater with a tear under the arm. Her mother had already left for the early shift. The apartment was still. The kind of stillness that hummed through the walls and made the refrigerator buzz sound like thunder. Shadow was waiting downstairs. As always. They walked side by side. Silence between them as natural as breath. But Lila felt it, that something was off. Shadow's ears flicked more than usual. He paused twice at intersections he normally walked straight through. And when they passed the old billboard near the corner store, he growled. Not loud, not to scare, to warn. School dragged. Travis and his crew were louder than ever, cocky from a weekend win at the local arcade tournament. Lila kept her head down. At lunch, they knocked over her tray. Shadow wasn't there. He wasn't allowed on school grounds. But Lila knew, somehow, he was near. Watching. Waiting. After school, she took the long way home. Past the alley. Past the chain-link fence behind the old repair shop. She didn't hear the footsteps behind her until it was too late. 3 of them. Travis, Ben, Cody. She turned, already backing up. Thought you'd be braver by now, Travis sneered. Figured that mutt of yours taught you something. She said nothing. Cody stepped forward. Maybe we should teach her something. Ben laughed. Or maybe we teach the mutt. That's when she knew. They weren't here for her. They were here for Shadow. She turned to run. Too late. Travis grabbed her wrist and shoved her against the alley wall. Call him, he hissed. Let's see what the freak does. I don't, she choked. I don't have to. Shadow was already there. She didn't see him arrive. One moment, the alley was full of jeers and threats. The next, it was silent. Ben was the first to turn. and freeze. Shadow stood at the mouth of the alley, head low, shoulders squared. Not snarling, not lunging. Still. Dead. Still. Travis snorted. What's it gonna do? Sit at me? He stepped toward Lila. Shadow moved. 1 second, he was 10 feet away. The next, Travis was on the ground, gasping. Shadow's weight pinning his chest. Teeth bared an inch from his throat. No sound. No bite. Just power. Held back by a thread. Ben ran. Cody tripped, trying to follow. Shadow didn't chase. He stood over Travis a moment longer, then stepped back. Travis scrambled to his feet, trembling, pants wet. You trained that thing? He stammered. Lila didn't answer. She didn't have to. The next day, the story had spread. No video, no photos, just whispers. About a girl and a dog who didn't bark. Who didn't bite. Who stood. Still. Unshakable. The school counselor asked to speak with Lila. I heard about what happened, she said gently. Would you like to talk about it? Lila shook her head. He didn't hurt anyone, she said. He just, reminded them. Reminded them of what? That some things fight without fury. Some things don't forget. The counselor paused and wrote nothing down. Shadow wasn't seen for 2 days after that. Lila worried. Walked every block. Called his name. Nothing. Then, the morning of her 13th birthday, she opened the door. And there he was. Fresh scar on his shoulder. A dented metal tag between his teeth. She took it gently. It read, K-9-91-V. Retired. Elite Response Division. She looked up. He sat down. Back straight. Eyes forward. Reporting for duty. Her protector. Her shadow. Her soldier. The dog tag sat on her desk for days. Lila would hold it at night, run her fingers along the raised numbers, try to imagine what those numbers meant. K9-91V. Shadow had a name once. A designation. He'd belonged somewhere. Worn armor. Obeyed orders. Walked into fire. And now he walked beside her. She didn't tell anyone about the tag. Not at first. She kept it between them. Some truths didn't need sharing. They just needed honoring. But the world had changed. Word had spread. Fast. Whispers became stories. Stories became rumors. Rumors became something harder to ignore. The girl with the ghost dog. The protector that didn't bark. The alley that went silent. It wasn't long before officials came knocking. The school called her out of class. 2 men in plain clothes waited in the front office. Not police. Not teachers. Something in between. They spoke calmly, politely. Asked questions she didn't fully understand. Do you know where the dog came from? Has he ever shown signs of aggression? Would you be willing to let us examine him? Lila said no. Again and again. Shadow sat outside the window. Still. Watching. Later that week, her mother found the tag. At the dinner table. She picked it up. Read the numbers, went pale. Where did you get this? Lila hesitated. Then told her everything. The alley. The boys. The growl. The stillness. The way Shadow had pinned Travis like he was trained for it. Her mother listened. Then got up. Opened the cupboard. Pulled out an old shoebox. Inside, photos. A man in uniform. A dog at his heel. Not Shadow, but close. This was your father's unit, she said. They trained dogs like that. Not just for obedience. For instincts. For people. Lila stared at the photo. A man smiling. A dog at attention. A look in its eyes like it could read the wind. Shadow isn't just some stray, her mother whispered. No, Lila said. He's a survivor. The next week, someone from the National K9 Registry arrived at school. They scanned Shadow. The chip was nearly dead, worn and unreadable. But they matched the number. K9-91V. Officially listed as missing in action 3 years ago. assigned to a classified rescue op overseas, presumed dead. Shadow had come back, but not to the government. To her. They offered to take him. To rehabilitate him, they said. To honor him. But Shadow didn't move when they called. Didn't respond to the old handler's command. Only when Lila said, "Come here, boy," did he rise, walk to her, and sit. They left empty-handed. From that day, everything changed. Shadow was no longer a secret. He became part of the school, allowed to walk beside her, even invited into assemblies. One day, during a presentation on resilience, the principal called them on stage. "This is Shadow," she said. "He was trained to serve. And then, when the world forgot him, he chose to serve again." The auditorium was silent, until someone stood. Then another. A standing ovation. For the dog who never barked. The boys who attacked her never returned to school. Rumors said they transferred. Others said their parents pulled them out. But Lila didn't care. She wasn't afraid anymore. Not because Shadow scared them, but because he reminded her that being alone and being weak are not the same. She wasn't alone anymore. She had a guardian, one that had chosen her, not out of duty, but something deeper. Faith. One evening, she sketched him again. This time, not just standing, but standing between her and a shadow. Between the world and her heart. The drawing would hang in the school hallway the next week. A bronze plate beneath it. Some protect with words. Some with noise. He protected with silence. Spring crept in slowly, painting soft green over the frost-bitten world. But in Lila's chest, something deeper had begun to thaw. Shadow wasn't just a companion anymore. He was a question. A mystery wrapped in muscle and memory. Lila began to read everything she could about K-9 units. She checked out books from the library, browsed dusty forums, even reached out anonymously to veterans groups. Her questions were simple. What happens to a dog who loses its soldier? And what does it mean when he chooses someone new? Weeks later, an envelope arrived in the mail. No return address. Inside, a single photo and a note. The photo showed a man in uniform kneeling beside a dog that looked like Shadow. Same scarred ear, same steady eyes. The note was typed, K-9 to 91, V served with Specialist Elijah Rowan. Last mission, rescue op in the Hindu Kush. Handler KIA. Dog presumed lost. No recovery. Lila's heart stilled. Elijah Rowan. Her father. The name her mother rarely spoke. The name on the grave marker in the empty lot where his body never came home. She showed the letter to her mom. There were tears. Quiet ones. Then, silence. Then, a whisper. He came back. From that day, Lila started telling Shadow stories. At night, beside her bed, she whispered tales she'd imagined about her father. About the kind of man who would hold the line. About the soldier who would tell his dog to run if it meant saving one more life. Shadow would listen, ears twitching, breath steady. And sometimes, he would rest his head on her feet, like he remembered too. One afternoon, Lila brought Shadow to a local memorial for fallen service members. He stopped ped at a specific name, Elijah Rowan. He sat, lowered his head, did not move for a long time. A veteran walking by noticed. "That's not a trick," he murmured. "That's grief." The town began to rally around them. A retired Marine offered to give Shadow a service harness, custom-stitched with a patch. Still serving. The school invited a local journalist to tell their story. The headline read, "Lost Dog Returns with a Mission and Finds His Fallen Soldier's Daughter." But it wasn't about headlines. Not for Lila. It was about mornings when she'd wake to find Shadow already by the door. Evenings when he'd nudge her sketchbook into her lap. And the way he always placed himself between her and the street. Not out of fear. out of instinct, out of love, out of duty once sworn and never broken. One night, Lila dreamed of the battlefield. The wind howled through mountains. Gunfire in the distance. A soldier crouched behind a wall, blood on his side. He whispered to a dog, "Shadow, go." The dog hesitated, then ran, toward safety, toward her. She woke in tears. Shadow was already at her feet, watching, waiting. They weren't just a girl and her dog anymore. They were a legacy, a promise kept, a soldier's last command, carried across oceans, through grief, into healing. It happened in the middle of math class. The announcement came crackling through the intercom. Something cold and procedural about a local lockdown. Code silver. Doors locked. Lights off. Students away from windows. At first, it felt like a drill. Then came the sirens. And the silence. Lila's classroom huddled in the corner, knees drawn to chests, breathing shallow. The teacher locked the door and pulled the blinds. Someone outside was running, then shouting. Then, the unmistakable thunder of footsteps down the hall. A scuffle, a cry, a crash. Then silence again. Lila's heart was a drum. Her eyes scanned the room, then the window. And there, through a gap in the blinds, was Shadow. Standing in the courtyard. Still. Watching. Waiting. Moments later, the gym door burst open. Someone, a stranger, masked, rushed in, yelling threats, waving something that caught the light. Lila didn't scream. She couldn't. Because the door to her classroom wasn't thick enough. Because courage doesn't always scream. It stands. And Shadow moved. Not into the classroom. Into the threat. No one saw exactly how he got in. 1 second, the hallway was empty. The figure fell, weapon clattering. Shadow stood over him, teeth bared, eyes locked. Not biting, holding, waiting for someone else to take over. Police arrived moments later. They found the suspect prone, disarmed, unharmed, Shadow unmoving. Until Lila stepped forward and whispered, "It's okay now." Only then did he retreat. Only then did he blink. Only then did he let go. The story went national. News vans, reporters, interviews. But Lila refused the spotlight. "This isn't about a hero dog," she told one of them. "It's about a soldier who never stopped standing guard." A week later, the town held a ceremony. The school field transformed into a sea of people. Flags, flowers, silence. Shadow sat on stage, calm, wearing his harness, still, serving. The mayor presented a medal. Lila read the inscription, "For valor in protection, for loyalty in silence." She bent down, pinned it gently to his chest, whispered, "This was never about saving me. You were saving the promise." Shadow's health began to fade not long after. The years of service, the wounds, the weather, they all caught up. He moved slower, slept longer. But still, every morning, he stood by the door. Until one day, he didn't. Lila found him beneath the window, curled, still, peaceful, a warrior's rest. She sat beside him for hours, didn't speak, didn't cry, just listened to the wind, to the silence he'd always stood inside. They buried him beneath the oak tree near the school. The town carved a stone. Shadow K, 9-91V. He didn't bark. He stood. A statue followed months later. Bronze. Life-size. Placed at the school gate. Students pass by it every day. Some salute. Some pause. Some place a hand on its back and whisper, "Thank you." Years passed. Lila grew, graduated, became a trainer for service animals. She kept a photo of her father and Shadow on her desk, and, on her arm, a small tattoo, 91V, still serving. Sometimes she visits the statue, not to mourn, but to remember, to honor, to carry the silence forward. Because Shadow wasn't just a dog. He was a sentinel. A memory.